very warm welcome to all of you. My name is Dharmendra Kanani. I'm Chief Spokesperson and COO at Friends of Europe, and I'm going to be your moderator for this morning's discussion about SMEs and cyber resilience. I'm sure many of you know this, but everyone talks about SMEs in this kind of generic way, as if we know what that means. It's everything from, like, you know, a two-person show up to, let's say, 250, if not more, people that are being employed in any company. It covers all sectors across Europe. And you know that it actually it accounts for 98% of businesses in Europe. You know, SMEs account for 98% of businesses and employ over 100 million people all over the place. And, you know, everyone talks about the fact that without SMEs, Europe would be nothing. It's meant to be the engine room of Europe's economy, and people are concerned, rightly so, about what has happened to them post-COVID, but also in the current economic circumstances we find ourselves in, because as you know, the hit rate on SMEs was quite high during COVID. A lot of single-person outfits just went and folded, but those who had the ability to have savings, but also, the most important thing that's what we're talking about today, those who were able to think about digitalisation and the digital future, or had the, let's say, the potential and also the money and the capacity to think about the digital future, were able to survive to a certain extent. What we're talking about here today, though, is the issue of cybersecurity, and in the context of the digitalisation of SMEs, how do we boost, as it says here, how do we boost the resilience of SMEs? Tomorrow in the Parliament, they're having that conversation on the Cyber Resilience Act that's happening, and you know, it was launched last September. We'll wait and see what kind of conversation the committee comes up with in terms of what do you do? Do you provide more skills, vouchers, capacity? What is it you do? You've all encounter high streets. You see SMEs everywhere around you. And think about it for a moment. How many of them are cyber resilient? How many of them are cyber secure? And those are the kind of questions that we want to discuss with you today, and with a view to actually discussing with you what do you think the Parliament should do on the eve of the discussion that's happening around the Act tomorrow, but also as we think about the elections next year and the new Commission mandate for 2024 onwards, what kind of recommendations should we make for our wonderful parliamentarians and politicians and commissioners about the role, capacity and future resilience and ambitions around SMEs in Europe? So that's what we've got on show. We've got a wonderful array of speakers, as you can see here. We're meant to be slightly red in coordination, as you can tell. And it's great to have the fact there's only one man on the panel. Isn't that fabulous? But we've actually met our commitment and more. So I hope you're good with that, and you should be good with that. You're in fantastic company. Good. Our resident MEP, Ivan, thank you very much also. I'm going to start with you. You know, you're on the committee, you've been engaged in these issues. Could you give us your sense of where we currently find ourselves in relation to SMEs? We've got the Act being discussed, you know, the legislation that's coming through. Where do you see the current situation in relation to SMEs, and what the key issues that you are concerned around in relation to the stealth, health and growth of SMEs? Over to you, Ivan.
I'm happy to start with this example of how security is important, and really I'm very happy to be surrounded by wonderful, capable women, so I feel wonderful. And I think truly this topic is very timely, because all of us, we become digital, and as you mentioned rightly, SMEs, they create most companies, they create most jobs in the European economy. 2/3 of jobs are created by SMEs. So what we are doing in the European Parliament, and particularly via our organization, which is called SME Europe, is trying to help SMEs to create more jobs, to have easier life. Basically, currently, SMEs are telling us that they deal with 3 major points. First one is still continuous bureaucracy, which is obvious, and we have to reduce bureaucracy, we have to minimize it, minimize administrative costs, so we apply the rule 1 in, 1 out on the European level, and also every legislation we try to simplify. Second issue, which is becoming also very, very important right now, is access to capital. Particularly during pandemic, SMEs, they got the problem with money. They got less reserve that in comparison with big companies, so they need more funding, more financing. some of them, they really struggle how to survive. So to create new tools, how to help SMEs from all perspectives, it is really now very, very important. And third point, which is probably the most important, is skills. They still deal with the skills level. They try to acquire people, but still they tell us we do not have enough capable people. So skills is the most important issue, and I do believe that's the point also we have to address in terms of cybersecurity, because there is not enough capable or educated people on the market, and it is related particularly to the SMEs. From the perspective of SMEs as the users, we have also the challenge there, because based on the research, only 70% of them, they deal with the newest technology. In comparison with big companies, there are 54% of big companies, they have successfully adapted new technologies. So there is some challenge, particularly taking into consideration that we have the objective in digital decade by 2030 that 90% of SMEs will deal with not only basic digital skills, but also with new technologies. So there is a challenge, and the question how to go ahead is very timely. From my perspective, we have to focus particularly on education. Therefore, cybersecurity skills academy is the crucial point which should be adapted this year, and also the access for SMEs to the new knowledge, how to deal with this point is very important. Cyber crimes, unfortunately, is growing based on very known data. If cybercrime would create the revenue of the state, it would be the third largest economy, maybe 5.5 trillion euro. So this is really the new field of economy, which is also threatening not only SMEs, but everybody, but particularly from point of view of SMEs. Currently, we face the lack of knowledge, and therefore I think education is the key which we will address in short time. Thank you.
Ivan, before you give up the mic, can I just ask you a couple of more just probing questions there in terms of, we know that SMEs are, everyone talks about them being the economic engine and the growth engine of Europe. Based on what your role in terms of the internal, with this 30th anniversary, by the way, of the internal market, we know this year, when we think about, in comparison to the other major economic blocs like America and blocs in Asia, what do you see in terms of the role that you will play, or as a, in the Parliament, in trying to overcome some of the barriers that you can see in terms of whether SMEs have actually benefited from the internal market? So it's a difficult question, I know, but when you think about the internal market was one of the cornerstones of creating the EU and its success and its growth. You have SMEs, the largest small groupings of bodies that are meant to be our economic growth. How do you marry the two more effectively?
Well, also there's a key point, because single market is a great idea. As you rightly pointed out, 30 years anniversary, it proves that it works, but it doesn't work in every field of business still. It works in terms of free movement of people, goods and capital, but not yet in every field of services. So the message is that we have to complete single market. That should be also the major task for next couple of years, particularly in services like delivery, posting, and telecommunication, energy. So still we have not financial services. We have not completed yet in many kind of services, even though we have to say that service directive, which has been approved by the parliament a couple of years before, is not yet fully implemented yet. So we have not implemented even what we have agreed on the European level. It is not implemented. So there is the challenge to complete single market, and particularly SMEs, they are dealing with many obstacles, many barriers if they deliver their products. Much better situation is in digital field, because creating digital service market, we started to basically to approve legislation which is the same for the whole European Union, and it starts to work. I mean, key issues like digital Services Act, Digital Markets Act. It was, I think, very, very breakthrough legislation, also in comparison with US and other parts of the world. And it may be too soon to evaluate if it is enough or not, because in fact it came into practice only in November last year. So, but definitely we watch it. How does it work? But good news is that this legislation basically removes the barriers and create really digital single market. And this legislation is also very important, also from this today's topic, from cyber perspective, because if we go ahead with Cyber Resilience Act, if we go ahead with Data Act, Artificial Intelligence Act, everything must fit together. Everything is complementary, and not only in terms of removing barriers and having the same rules on the same market, but also from a cyber resilience perspective, because we have to take into consideration this aspect in every kind of legislation, and that's what we try to do in the European Parliament.
Thank you very much. Colleagues, you're not here as passive observers, by the way, just to let you know. You're also here meant to engage and think about ideas also. So I'll come and call upon you, but be thinking about what you want to ask Ivan, because you know he sits in an important committee. He's here for that reason, to be able to answer questions from you about what you think concerns are or what the issues are for the future. And actually, I'm going to move on to a lovely representative from Google. But one of the things that we should think about is that how many different acts do you need to make digitalization in Europe work? You know, you just reeled off 5 or 6. And I wonder we need to think about, perhaps as we look into the new mandate, do we need some sort of Uber Act on digitalization that covers everything? That's just a question that occurs to me in my mind, but you may have different thoughts. But thank you, Ivan, we'll come back to you. Karen, lovely to see you again, and also a partner, thank you, partner to our event here today, but also a long-term partner over time. Karen, thank you for being with us, and you've just done a bit of research. Google's done some research on SMEs. Tell us what you found and what the key issues are.
Thank you very much. Yeah, so I think MEP Štefanec said a lot of it. So what we did is that we commissioned a research, at the end of last year. So it's like a snapshot, 2,000 SMEs across 10 countries, because we wanted to understand where have been their journey towards digitalization and what are the obstacles they face. And I think it's quite important because we talk about, why SMEs actually are like the foundation basically of the economy, but also what we see is that they are really like the target of a lot of cyber attacks. And how do the cyber attackers do? I mean, they basically go through the people. So the people is the point of entry for the businesses. And this is why, when you see that there's about 100 million phishing cases a day, you understand that you need to be able to protect the people. With the Ukraine war, we've seen a higher sophistication of cyber attacks. We've seen actually cyber attackers, meddling with like kind of state-funded attacks. I mean, there's been a huge evolution and also 300% increase in terms of the phishing attack just last year. So it gives you an idea about how, vulnerable basically the companies are and how they need to be protected. So let me give you a few insights about the study. I mean, the first one actually, which is actually quite good news, if I can find one good news from the pandemic, is that actually the SMEs have digitalized. They've doubled their digital capability, which is actually quite fantastic to see. The other good news is that they realized that, by being digital, actually they've been better, coming out of the economic crisis during pandemic, which is actually quite good. And also the companies which were quite highly digitalized, they realized that actually they're quite confident about the upcoming recession. They think that, with the digital tools they have, they will be able to come out okay of it. But of course, I mean, there's huge diversity into the SMEs. I mean, like about 22% of them have like 0 to 4 tools on digital, so pretty low level. 77% of them actually have got medium to high capabilities, so they use like 4 to 8 tools, which is not amazing still. And only like 15-20% of them are using like big data AI. So there's still quite a long way to go. And also we need to kind of level the, the capabilities. The other thing which I think is quite interesting is that we basically asked them, okay, what do you think are the barriers for you? And they came up with 3 barriers, which is exactly what MEP Štefanec said. It's like, really, it's 3 barriers. First one is the skills. They don't have the skills. The second one, they don't have the funding. And the third one, they are very worried about cybersecurity. So I think, we're into violent agreement on this panel, so we can then discuss about, what are the solutions. And to let me unpack that a bit. So what we saw in the study is that we're worried that the cyber attacks is actually going to make SMEs draw back a bit from their digitalizations because they're very vulnerable. From the 2,000 companies we surveyed, actually 43% of them got a cyber attack over the last 2 years, which is quite consequent. And what they say is that majority of them understand that cybersecurity is very important, but they don't really know how to do it, so they don't really have the skills for that. And this is actually what goes into my point about skills. I mean, first, the basic skills are very low. Second, they cannot actually hire, IT specialists, for two reasons. The first one, they're not enough out there. I mean, there's like about 9 million basically specialists in Europe, and we need 20 million by 2030. So there is quite a huge gap. And also, I mean, concretely, they face, restrictions when they want to hire them because, it costs a lot for them. And then it goes back to the fact that, they've actually, been a bit more economic cautious, because of the pandemic. And also, frankly speaking, when you're a cybersecurity specialist, you want to work for a big company, not for an SME. So they also have a hard time to actually attract basically these people. And then the lack of funding, I think, says it all. Is like, they've been much more cautious, and actually for them it's a big investment, to get into a cyber expert. So it's about how we help them. So that was basically the main conclusions of the study.
And from your perspective, what can large platforms like yourself help? What can you do to help in this situation? Do you find that, a lot of SMEs will turn to a platform like yourself or other big platforms for support?
So I think we do a wide number of things. I mean, the first thing, like, as I said, the attacks go through the people. So what we do is that when people use our tools, we actually protect the tools. So for instance, we remove 99% of the phishing emails, so you don't receive them, so that actually get protected. Okay. When you're using apps, the apps we use are controlled. We also have installed double verifications, on our systems, which actually, with that, we've seen a 50% decrease of people being basically stolen, their data or stolen their accounts. So that's for the tools. And then as a company, it's like, we basically support a lot the SMEs because we're a platform which helps. So for instance, during the pandemic, we help when you're on map, we help companies, to set up a digital capability, which was actually then protected. And also we provide a lot of training. I mean, over the last 10 years, I think we did about 12 million training of people and companies, all over Europe, and we are partner of the Pact for Skills, and I think we will be joining soon, the Cybersecurity basically academy, which is going to be set up. So I think it's everybody's responsibility to work together to really increase the capabilities of the people.
I'm going to bring people in from the audience. I hope you do have a question or even just a query even. But given what both of you have said, what's the threat level for SMEs in Europe in the context of what's happening in Ukraine and what we do know about malicious actors, Russia, elsewhere? And I know we've got colleagues on the panel who can answer this question, but from your perspective as a politician and as a major platform, have you been doing kind of a threat analysis in terms of understanding what's how concerned should we be about the level of malevolent hits that we're getting in Europe? Because we are a target, I imagine. So Ivan, do you want to start first?
Yes, we are the target, and I would say that cybersecurity should be the integral part of defense strategy in Europe, because if we talk about defense, many people talk about number of guns and tanks, but our defense, first of all, should be cybersecurity. This should be priority, and also in terms of investments for future, we should talk much more about investment into cybersecurity, just to have guarantee infrastructure, electricity, and banks, financial services, and transport, etc. So that should be the major policy. So we have to improve the investments into defense, and integral part of this should be cybersecurity.
Good to hear. Thank you. Do you want to comment on anything on that?
Very happy to. We did an analysis. I mean, we have cyber experts basically at Google, and we did an analysis just before Davos 2 weeks ago. And what we saw, which I referred to before, is that actually the Ukraine war, has really been a trigger to increase of cyber attacks. And what happens, like it was the Russian government, going basically after the Ukraine, capabilities, in terms of the public utilities, but also the government, the people, the journalists, all the people, basically the NGOs, all people which are important. And then we've seen recently actually a shift out of Ukraine to also attacking basically all the users from NATO. And so like doing disinformation, but also doing a lot of attacks as well, against the people. And so we've seen a much more, I would say, sophistication of the ransomware, sophistication of the actors. And that's really interesting because it's really developed. I mean, it's harder now to track. The evolution is very big. So it asks us to be always constant, basically, in terms of like being on track of the latest development and working together, basically, for the new fights.
Okay. Any questions from the floor here today in response to what you've heard? Any concerns? Sir, please do introduce yourself and who your question's aimed at, or whether it's just a general open question.
Actually, probably more towards Ivan at this point. Kostas Dervenis, I'm from Intrasoft, an IT company that provides services to the EU. We have discussed the requirements and I have no argument there. My argument is from a contrary position. Right now, the unemployment rate for cybersecurity experts is minus 200%. For every 2 positions, there's 1 person. Now, Europe does not function under pure free market criteria. We are a top-down rather than a grassroots, bottom-up society. What is the Commission doing to enhance the availability of cybersecurity experts in Europe? Because free market criteria are not going to do it. Perhaps some tax scheme, perhaps some benefits, some bonuses, I don't know. But as a Greek, the reason that I'm overly concerned is I was told this morning that the accident that happened with the 2 trains happened because the workers, the union, refused to use the IT system to protect their jobs, and everything was done manually, resulting in 32 deaths and I don't know how many casualties. But the issue then is, how are you incentivizing cybersecurity and digitalization? Thank you.
Very good question. Thank you very much. Anybody else? This is great for a first round. Gentleman there, again, introduce yourself.
Yes, thank you very much. I'm Laurens van Ginneken from the European Liberal Forum. What we have noticed in some European member states as well is when it comes to educating and also training employees for actually also employee development, that investments from SMEs have dropped down sometimes over the past 40 years with up to 80% for Belgium, for example. So only 20% of the budgets that they were spending to train employees for the personal development as well that we have seen 40 years ago, like only 20%, it's just a fraction of that is still being invested in training them. How can we actually incentivize SMEs to start training their employees again to develop themselves, also especially for cyber resilience skills? Because if we have a shortage in experts, why can't we be more resourceful with the experts we have and actually use their knowledge to train employees to actually to have like a better, let's say, a broader wall of defense also of the SMEs, because the more people know basic knowledge of cybersecurity, the better we can protect our SMEs, and the better we can protect our economy as well, because most breaches actually happen due to human error as well. And that's something we should...
But from your work, if I can, just ask you, are we just in a bubble here? Or do we know what we're talking about in terms of if we are not running an SME, we know that we're going through an economic crisis, just come out of a, massive COVID issue. How do I balance the books? Isn't it a question of simply just hard cash available to SMEs in terms of your work, the research?
If we look at it, it's not merely about cash reserves, it's also about sometimes making choices. If you, of course, are planning, like it's always good if we see some investments to hire experts to pay a high price for that, but when we sometimes see that the quickest and the best wins can be by also training the current human resources you already have in your company. That's also something we see, and that's sometimes a bit of a mismatch, but maybe we could see how we could incentivize SMEs to try to invest more on that again, because it's really in a decline for 50 years.
Sure.
We can't just put it onto one crisis.
Yeah, I suppose going back to what Karen was saying, the majority of them are very small. And I suppose they're not the larger companies. So perhaps we all need to think about what can you do to make, on a high street, which is full of SMEs, become more cyber resilient? Is there a different infrastructure you could employ? But I will come back to you. Gentlemen here, please again introduce yourself.
Great, thank you so much. My name is Yorgos Verdi and I'm a policy advisor at the European Digital SME Alliance. My question has to do with bureaucracy. I think we can all agree today that one of the main barriers to SMEs' access and digital growth is bureaucracy. But then at the same time, we talk about all these legislative developments such as the CRA, the AI Act, and we know very well that SMEs do not have the resources, the money, they do not have dedicated legal departments, not the funding available to go to fancy law firms to be able to comply with all this legislation. So my question is, how do we ensure that this legislation serves their digitalization instead of hindering it?
Okay, again, you're from the Alliance. Thank you for that, a very good question. But before you give up the mic, again, you have to say, tell us, you represent SMEs in this community, in a European context, okay? What you've heard from the panel today, does that resonate with you? Are these the issues that the people that you represent actually experience?
Absolutely, I would say, I think just to add to some things we have heard about the risk of cyber attacks in the current geopolitical environment has been particularly high.
Okay.
It's very interesting to mention some data. According to the World Economic Forum, phishing attacks since the COVID-19 pandemic have increased by 600%. And then according to ENISA, 57% of SMEs cite that a major cyber attack could be the reason that they have to go bankrupt or close down their businesses. So we understand right here that the threat assessment is particularly high, and the ingredients that have been mentioned so far, I say, are very much aligned with what we say. We need skills, because in cases of phishing attack, the weakest link can be the entry point into the SME, and that can have major consequences.
Thank you very much. Ivan, I don't want to come constantly back to you, but I want to bring other panelists who I'm sure have got responses to what we've heard. But just a general reflection on the questions that we've heard so far, because I'm not in terms of what the commissions do. I know that we've got colleagues here from there. Thank you so much. That you can't bear the responsibility of that. But as a parliamentarian and the committee you're on, that thing about the shortage of experts and therefore the risks that are being posed on daily life, is that been something that your committee or the group your group has been dealing with in terms of promoting that with the Commission?
Yes, definitely we are aware of this, but let me be very clear what we can do on the European level, because we've got the shortage not only cyber experts but also IT experts, roughly 1 million jobs in EU. So that's the point you raised in absolutely right way. But we cannot solve it only on the European level, because in terms of education, in terms of universities, the competence is not on the European level. We can just support funding, requalification programs. We can do something via European budget, via our activities, but the substance which must be changed is on the national level. From European level, we cannot manage the contents on the universities. So, and to create and to educate the experts, it takes some time, and so it must be initiative from bottom, from the states, from the universities, which we can support. We can talk to them, we can motivate them, but at the end, this is not what we can fully solve from the European level. So that's the reality, and we have to also deal with this issue with IT industry. We are aware of that, so IT industry is addressing this. So this is the challenge which is in front of industry, academics, and policymakers all together. But definitely something must be changed in terms of particularly the contents and the universities, and also in terms of practice experience from the field. So that's what I can say. In terms of other issues, what I think the question was SMEs, how they can ensure that they will be reskilled. And so, as I mentioned, very important initiative about Cybersecurity Skills Academy. We have to have that place there for SMEs, definitely. We have to take care about education of SMEs and also to include it in the programs. For example, on the European level, and Commission is doing a wonderful job in this case, is the program Entrepreneurs for Young Entrepreneurs. This is Erasmus program. They can share experiences among the countries. So to talk and to involve, especially cyber companies there, and to spread this knowledge, it would be, for example, much useful for SMEs in this case. I think that's what I can add.
Thank you. Karen, you want to come back? Before I move to Eva, I'm going to bring you in.
Yeah, I mean, I just wanted to come back to what you were saying. I mean, of course, we need IT experts, but we also need basically the people to develop their capability. And I think we need to complement, the academic system, which are at the country level, which maybe are not, developing, at the same pace, with what we call short-term learning. So, I mean, you can be doing courses, for like 3 months, 6 months, where you really develop the capabilities. And I think we need to enhance that. We need to give like capacity for, if this training is happening, that the companies, maybe get supported, financially for that. These kind of things need to be developed. And I think it will be the way to actually increase as well the basic learning for that. So I think that's actually quite important. And I think there will be a nice flexible complement to the academic courses, which are taking a bit more time to develop basically as well at national level.
Great, thank you. Eva, before I come to you, can I have the mic back, please? Just the gentleman who asked the questions about skills. Sorry, I'm going to come back to you. In asking the question that you did, right, and doing the work that you do, have we got the right answer to your question?
It's a very tough question to answer again.
No, this is the kind of what I'm trying to do here is the brain is in the room, not just on the panel.
I understand. I don't believe that a bottom-up approach at the national level will work. Mm-hmm. And I say that as someone who deals with this issue every day. Yeah. For better or worse, incentives in Europe come from the top down. So people get excited about something and then they act on it. And all the SMEs, all the small industries will follow, whether in the IT sector or not. The problem is right now, for example, that people are working in Europe, selling their skills to the US, okay? So if I pay somebody $300 a day, let's say, and an American company can come in on site and offer $700, of course the engineer is going to go sell it to the... it's not a question I can answer, and
sure.
to be honest, I tried to stir up the pot and asking it, but in my opinion, some kind of tax incentive within the European nations promoted by the Commission or the Parliament, or some kind of, let's say, grouping or societal gearing towards this will steer the IT companies and the engineers themselves to
stay
to solve this problem
and solve the problem.
To stay within Europe.
Okay, let's yeah, go. Sorry,
but I believe it's my name is Kostas. I believe it's top down, not bottom up. I don't think that, because our universities are quite good.
Yeah.
And the quality of the personnel that come out is evident in the fact that they're sold all over the world. I mean,
yes, exactly.
I have to fight with talent scouts from the US, for example, to keep my engineers. Mm-hmm. Therefore, they're good. Therefore, the problem is not in the education. The problem is in how it's structured for them to work here. Mm-hmm. I don't have an answer. I'm looking for one. That's why.
No, but I mean, the clue is in the diagnosis of the problem, clearly. And so what you set out is an interesting proposition. Let's tweet that out. Is that actually should Europe introduce a new tax incentive, both on an industry basis, to ensure that we keep talent here, but also we recruit talent into Europe? Let's see what people have to say about that.
That's a wonderful idea. I'm all for it.
Okay, great. Thank you. Obviously, yes, I know a lot of people in the private sector would love to have taxes, but I think, there's something about using it wisely and incisively rather than just using it as a go-to shopping bag every time you've got a problem. But let's move on. Thank you all very much for that. Eva, thank you for being patient, and my other colleagues on the panel. Eva, you're involved in cybersecurity matters on a daily basis. We know that, and I'm sure many of you know that there's a new regulations been introduced, came into force, which is enabling better measures for cybersecurity, especially amongst SMEs. And there's a grace period of 21 months for SMEs to comply. So this is very much a top-down approach. So regulation has been introduced, it's coming to force to say, actually, you need X, Y, and Z if you're going to be fit and safe and secure in Europe for SMEs. What's your sense of capability, speed, and what the problems are going to be for SMEs as they try and comply with this well-meaning bit of legislation?
Yes, indeed. So if your question is, are SMEs ready? Well, the simple answer is no.
Okay.
But this is a good thing, because otherwise the directive would have been many years of discussions and energy for something that doesn't have a positive impact. So here is an opportunity of the directive to make a positive impact by incentivizing these SMEs to improve their cyber resilience. And here, when I think we discussed what are the challenges, I fully agree. Skills, we miss the personnel. I can address this later on. But another of the challenges is the funding. And the funding could flow from governments easier if there is a legal basis for it. Mm-hmm. We have seen, for instance, the NIS one has supported operator of essential services, not only by funding for this operator of essential services to implement the directive, because it's a very tangible thing that governments can give money for, but also it helped by setting the baseline. What are the measures that we should focus on? Because cybersecurity is a huge field, and you could start from the technical part, from the organizational part, from policies, from monitoring. There's different steps. So it's good for regulation to come in and to provide this baseline so that everyone start focusing, knowing where to start from. And then the directive itself also provides tools for SMEs. It requires member states to have point of contact, to have SMEs in their strategies. So you could imagine SMEs would have someone to call. They could go to the CERT in the future with the directive and say, hey, I've been hacked, I have this issue, can you help me? Because you are assigned to help companies that comply with the directive. And then, so the bad news obviously is that they're not ready yet. What they don't have yet, I see, at least from a NISA study, I'm looking forward to read the Google one, which is a more recent one, but NISA, they did this study 2021. They show that 70% of the companies, SMEs in Europe, they have anti-malware, some kind of a vulnerability detection. They have some firewall installed, which is good. But again, the objective of the directive is to make this to 100. And then what is really missing still, less than 30% have security officer. Here again, the skills, the availability of personnel, and security policy, so the governance side. And this would be a major challenge when you have a regulation. How do you make sure that you comply with the regulation if you don't have the personnel, the system inside to check what is the requirement and how do you comply with it? And I have a couple of ideas of how we can address this on the skills level, because I'm a cybersecurity expert, so I provide services mostly to major companies because that's where the real work is, but I also work with a lot of startups, SMEs, helping them improve immediately their cybersecurity. And you end up doing 3, 4, 5 jobs at the time. So tax incentives could help, but they could be also complex to take advantage of. Something I work with a lot is vouchers. In Belgium, we have vouchers in some regions more easier to take advantage of than others for improving cybersecurity. We have at European level, we have at DIH where project vouchers. So these kind of incentives that up until now were introduced in the absence of legal ground to give funding could also help to incentivize also the security industry to grow and to train people to have the, let's say, the requests necessary for also investing in training of new people. And maybe not last but not least, we have to mention also the role of women in cybersecurity. It's untapped potential.
Exactly.
It is still untapped potential. When we speak about IT, still very scary. for many of us to go in the field. But initiatives like Women for Cyber, which we have now Belgian chapter, where women can find the resource, the tools, and they could also see there's other women out there doing technical jobs or organizational jobs. So why not you? Why not you cannot do it? So this kind of visibility of the different profiles and leadership in the field would help actually attract more young talent. And
I mean, I'm glad you made that point, because in 7 days' time, all of us, will be thinking about International Women's Day, and we'll feel warm and cuddly, and think, great, we're doing the good thing, but actually, yawning gap on pay, yawning gap on access to certain skills, and actually, as you say, getting into cybersecurity for women, it's a huge, tough task, and the bar just seems to get higher every year, from my sense. But and I'll come back. I know you want to come into that question, but what do we do when you talk about the voucher, right? Why is a voucher more effective than a tax incentive?
Because it's immediate.
Right.
You have a voucher, so we sign a contract, we do the activity. Could be 1 week, it could go as fast, and companies can get their money immediately back. It is not, tax would come in 2-3 years. If it comes, it will be digged into some complex accounting balance sheets. This is not, let's say, incentivizing that.
And is a tax voucher something that the government produces and then the market then responds to? Is there a market? So is that the route, the solution you're thinking?
Yes, okay. yes. It's from regions mostly, but still there are government organizations that produce. Some of them have different criteria. It would be nice to have kind of European harmonization on that. There were projects with EXO where regions learn from each other. Interact Cyber, a very interesting project. Regions will learn from each other what were the best practices, so they could eventually harmonize and implement the same kind of a voucher system. This is, probably what would work best. Of course, you don't need to make it too hard for companies to take advantage, okay, or for the consultants to get certified, because then, again, if it's a burden, there's other jobs
sure.
to do.
But how do you make it easy? Because when you think about, again, what Karen was saying about the research, if the majority of the SMEs are small, you're not going to get a tech officer in a company running a cafe. So let's get real about that. So exactly. So there's another great idea. Voucher. Would a voucher scheme work? Let's put it out there again for a debate. Is that one of the solutions? So you've got a tax incentive as one, but the other one is create a voucher system, which actually is easier, faster, but is there a marketplace for delivery, and how do you make it work? But let's kind of think about that. Could I have the mic here? Please do introduce yourself.
Thank you very much. My name is Milda Kakluskaitis. I'm actually from European Cybersecurity Organization that Iva just mentioned. So, and actually we are the organization who works with different cybersecurity industry players. So from big companies, providers, small startups and SMEs, providers of cybersecurity solutions, also SMEs as users, and also research institutes, universities. So we have like CISOs as well. So we have like, we call it like 360 degrees approach to cybersecurity. And I just kind of would like to react what Iva mentioned. So first of all, thanks a lot to referring to EXO and our initiatives. And I just would like to react on this kind of thing that we are talking a lot about regulations, which is good. They set the track, right? They set the direction where we have to go. But I think it's very important to also not only have directions and discuss them here in Brussels, but also work with the local ecosystems. So I mean with the regions, because regions has the proximity to the companies, actually to these SMEs whom we are talking about, and they can really help to increase their cyber hygiene, which is very important. Also to increase the learning opportunities for these SMEs, these hairdressers or boring offices who think that we are so boring that nobody will hack us, but actually they're at the forefront of these hacking activities, and they suffer. So it's very important to work with the regional ecosystems, and this is also I think what Iva mentioned, that there's a lot of exchange of good practices can happen if you work with the you go outside Brussels, you go to these regions who also have the capabilities. They can meet these people. They have different initiatives from inviting SMEs for breakfast on Friday morning, where they can actually discuss their concerns and they can learn from each other. And another thing I would like to mention is about the market development. So this is I think one of the concerns that we are working a lot. So we talked that SMEs maybe don't have the resources to improve their cybersecurity readiness. But usually these are small businesses. They don't need a lot of complex solutions. They're not big corporates. But for example, so we can have SaaS solutions. You can have MSSP services, which already can significantly increase their cybersecurity posture. But again, for this, you need to develop a market, and here you need also investments and work with the SMEs and startups who are providers of these solutions, that they can provide the cybersecurity services and products for the SMEs, the users. So I think it's very important to bring these two gaps together. And also, for example, Iva represents also one the provider side, and I think this is very important to also talk about the need to develop the cybersecurity market in Europe of the providers. And I think this is also what we did with Exxon. We were gladly cooperating with the Commission and with the EIB on analyzing the market. And actually the study that we initiated with the European Investment Bank showed that there is almost 2 billion investment gap in cybersecurity in Europe compared to the US. So
absolutely,
there's a lot of things to be done.
I mean, every region's in on the act apart from us, unfortunately. Yet we're such an attractive market for hacking.
Yeah, but Europe is #1 in this research and innovation. But unfortunately, this research and innovation does not turn into the market solutions. And
absolutely.
I think this is a lot to be done.
Excellent. Thank you for your contribution. And what about the issue about women?
Oh, right. Women.
just because you happen to be one.
I am women in cyber. There's a lot of women in cyber in this room, so that's great. Yeah, so this initiative...
But the bubble's small, no?
It's small, but I think with enough of effort, it will expand, and it's already expanding. So also I think this Women for Cyber is also coming from EXO, so it's EXO initiative that was initiated by us, but now it's a separate body. It's a foundation which has different chapters. So of course, I can refer to my colleagues who are working on that, but we will be happy to provide more information, and we're happy to invite. Women for Cyber is, of course, addressing this gender issues, so men are also welcome to contribute and join.
Absolutely. Absolutely. No. So I'm sorry, I couldn't resist. I had to. Because obviously, why would you only answer one question? Thank you very much for your contribution. That's really very helpful. I suppose for all of us in this room, one thing that keeps on occurring to me is that we're having this conversation, and when you walk out there and there's a street down there with all these small to medium enterprises, I wonder what they'd make of this conversation. And actually, when you think about some of the solutions, is there a street by street, city by city solution that could actually create economies of scale, for accessing security if we are a major threat? And why would we leave it to the butcher, the hairdresser, the cafe on a street to individually protect? Is there a different solution? But I leave that to some of you to think about in the audience. You'd like to come in? Of course, absolutely. Our speaker, I'll bring you in now if you haven't answered that question. Go on. Please introduce yourself. Obviously, it's Christine. Yes.
Oh, no, sorry. I would answer the issue about the hairdressers, for example.
Sorry, Michelle,
they don't have their IT themselves, so they outsource their IT. And I think there should be better legislation or rules about this, like making service level agreements to make that more cyber secure. Because the websites are old and they are leak, so I think that will be a solution. And also maybe in Holland there is a cyber resilience scan that also is possible for the small retailers.
While you've got the mic, let me just stay with you. So thank you, Michelle, because you're coming from a centre of excellence on this issue, and so before going to Christiane, why don't we stay with you in terms of you're researching this issue day in, day out. You're a centre of excellence. Share with us some of your knowledge in this space in relation to what could we be doing more and better, and what do you see as the kind of big threats or challenges for us?
Okay, I can make my statement then. Yes, I connect research and education on cybersecurity behavior with daily practice in SMEs at the Hague University as a researcher and lecturer. So organizations often have technical take technical measures, but the human factor is has been manipulated more often. So cyber criminals manage to circumvent these technical security. Some more attention is needed on this employees' behavior. More knowledge about the criminals, but also the vulnerability and the strength of the targets is needed. And that is what my colleagues at the center and I do with research. The aim is at SMEs, especially, like we heard, they have small budget, not so many skills, or it's outsourced, but also, their risk perception is not so high. So our clients are and corporations are SMEs, Netherlands, ministries, police, etc. On the university, we train cybersecurity professionals who will be future entrepreneurs and cyber security professionals. And let's see, we connect these students with enterprises in real life. They are doing social engineering attacks, so they manipulate employees and try to get sensitive information by telephone, or doing walking in the office without being asked, or digitally. They are starting this next week, and they are managing a lot of information. So we did research on about 100 attacks, and 70% of the physical attacks succeeded. They could walk in or asked about information with open desktops, etc. And also half of the digital attacks by WhatsApp. They also do new innovative ways, or QR code. They will try to do it now. That's half of them succeeded also by telephone. And I think especially the small offices, we looked at the strength in a recent study, and the small offices were more strong against the attacks physically or by telephone, because it appeared they had a conversation. There was more social control, so they could warn each other. They worked together. And let's see. And this is what the students do is learning by doing. So the employees of the organizations, they also experience how it's easy to be manipulated, and they become conscious of their incompetences and also the mistakes they can make. And that's an intervention in itself. So more and more companies like to have students, especially the small SMEs. Let's see. I think the cyber safe norm could be changed by leaders, have leaders as a role model, and also have more, the environment, like the social environment, but also the design of the physical environment. Like have a conversation protocol, what to do when a person is calling you. And like the environmental, digital environment, the companies where was a banner installed when an email came from outside, they were more strong against these kind of cyber attacks. So, of course, the basic security should be in order. There are scans to do for small SMEs for free. The IT knowledge could be also sent by buddies. So students were also buddies, went to small SMEs and learn about their secure digitalization. And that really works. So it was a small study, but we will make it broader. And that goes two ways. The student will get more experience, and yeah, of course, the company will be helped. So to find out what are the vulnerabilities, it's really important, especially in the small SMEs, and the barriers to behave cyber safe. There will be done more research on it, and to work on a cyber safe environment.
Great. Okay, thank you very much. So I'm conscious of the fact that you've been listening quite some time, and it's quite warm in here now. So let's do a little bit of exercise. No, I'm not going to ask you to do physical exercise. I'm asking you how cyber secure do you feel? Oh, let me put it this way: are you concerned about your cyber security? Hands up. Kind of put them up a bit higher. It's a photo opportunity. Where are my colleagues? Take a photograph. Okay, so great. Okay, so there's quite a lot of you. Can I just say, is that bit because? Can I just pick on someone? Is that because of what you're hearing today, or have you, you've always been concerned about it in recent times? You had your hand up. Can I ask you? Can I have the mic here, please? Do introduce yourself.
My name is Zelinka. I work at APCO Worldwide. Yes, indeed. I've always had a long-standing concern about my cybersecurity. I do feel like, at work we're being told enough about these issues, and there's precautions being taken, but it feels like it's never enough, right? Like you keep having or keep hearing about cyber attacks happening, so it feels like you can never be too cautious.
And is that a sense of things that you're hearing, and you're kind of getting a sense because you work in APCO as well? But is it because have you had experiences of it? Do you know when you're being are you literate enough? I mean that in the nicest way, because we all have to have literacy around our own security. But do you feel as if you know that it's happening to you, or do you feel that it's that perception issue?
I definitely feel like there's enough trainings available, and I've done some myself, but I still feel like I could be vulnerable to them. I don't know, it feels like you don't want to be overly arrogant, this could never happen to me, even though you think you've done enough trainings and you're aware. So yeah.
You're nodding your head, so I've caught your eye. Can you take the camera, the mic?
Yes, thank you.
Respond similarly in terms of you said yes, you feel it. Is it perception or reality?
So my name is Elena. I work for Google, but in a non-engineering role, and I perceive myself as a bit average aware of the cyber threats, both on a personal and a work level. I have certainly experienced this on a personal level many years ago, but also recently. I also have to say that I am quite worried about my parents, who are more and more online, are using more and more different digital tools, but do not have the same level of literacy as I do. And then for anyone who has tried to train their parents on anything digital, you might know how complicated this is. Outside of my work, I also volunteer very actively with one NGO, which has quite an elaborate governance structure concerning cybersecurity as well. And only last year we got attacked 3 times with quite incredible consequences. I have to say that it was quite shocking. I think someone mentioned that maybe around 50% of SMEs consider this as a big reason for them going bankrupt. And I actually got to observe that firsthand, and it's really scary. So in that sense, I think that both on a personal and professional level, it is good to be aware and constantly conscious of that, and also stay up to date, because I think that threats are ever evolving. We saw this during COVID, we see now this with the Ukrainian war, and I won't be surprised if there is a new way of innovation in that space as well.
Thank you. Thank you for bringing up the issue of older communities, because I agree with you. When you think about uncles, aunts, parents that will readily give up their details online without having any of the security walls or firewalls around them, and suddenly, bam, their bank accounts are emptied. Gentleman here, I'm going to ask. You had your hand up too, if I may. Again, please. So just because I'm obviously being pro women here. We need a man every now and again to comment. So, but you're not the token man, I promise you. So, introduce yourself, please.
Surely. My name is Hussein Ahmed from KPMG Advisory and the Cyber Privacy Practice. And I'm a telecom guy à la base, but I did study a little bit law, European law, to understand how things were with the trilog. I spent some time following regulations, ICT regulations in the domain of information security and privacy. The question that you asked about...
So you're very literate in this space, and I mean that when you see it about literacy, I mean in that context. So you know what some of the things that people might do. And so in that context, you still feel concerned about your cyber security?
Yes, it suffices to open my bank application 5 times a day, just to confirm that my bank has not been...
Okay, I shouldn't laugh at that. Why not? Why not? Absolutely, you're right.
I mean, we are dependent. We are heavily dependent on this.
Yes.
And we do everything on the mobile phone. And yeah, I mean, I just got a phishing email on my work account, which is funny. So I had to report that. I don't know if it was a phishing exercise or it's a real one. So when it comes to that, yes, I'm aware of the techniques and things, but then, you know, I'm still dependent on a lot of digital services, and then the question becomes, okay, to what extent, knowing, I mean, I'm not gonna name and shame any client in particular, but knowing sometimes how certain organizations are not ready, and hence, you know, you mentioned NIS directive and the second version that is coming. I wonder to what extent will things improve and things will be taken more seriously to have the basic foundation of cybersecurity and towards, let's say, a second level of more resilient and so yeah. I mean, it's a journey.
Thank
it's a
you.
journey, I think.
No, absolutely.
I'm learning within that journey myself.
Of course.
I wouldn't claim that.
Thank you, and thank you for responding to my challenge. So one of the things, I'm going to move to Christiane because you've been so patient, but you know, I wanted you to kind of react to a lot of what we're hearing, obviously, in the room, because everyone's going to come to you and say it's the Commission's responsibility or the parliamentarian's responsibility. But you know, the big question that emerges from, you know, you've got someone who's highly literate, someone who's working in a tech company, you've got others who are working in various ways. Something occurs to you is that whose responsibility is it to protect our cybersecurity? It's a big question that comes about, really. Is it a laissez-faire market that actually all of us have to have responsibility? Or should it be government? So the reason why I'm asking that question, colleagues, is that we launched an exercise last October about a renewed social contract. So one of the things that Friends of Europe is doing is promoting the fact that by 2030, Europe should have a renewed social contract. And we're going to come up with some policy ideas by this October as to what the new mandate should do. And the question we're asking as a part of a renewed social contract is that a contract is about, you know, what is the role of government, our role as citizens, and what's the role of the private sector. And this cybersecurity issue, I think, cuts at the heart of the modern renewed social contract, is that whose responsibility is it to protect our cyber safety? I'm not going to, that's the question I want to start with, but also I want to obviously give the opportunity to say a little bit about what you are doing at DG Connect in terms of the wider policy context that we've all been talking about, and what you see as the opportunities. Tell the good story, potentially. But who should be responsible? And I know you're not Ursula von der Leyen, you're not a commissioner, but it would be good to get your views.
Thank you. It's always nice to be able to give my views, even if I'm not a commissioner indeed. I think actually the two questions are very closely linked. And cybersecurity is definitely an area where it is everyone's responsibility. We cannot get around that. There is a big personal responsibility. There's responsibility with businesses, with governments, with the Commission, with the Parliament, and so on. And indeed, I think the key thing here is to not fall into the trap where, because it's everyone's responsibility, it's kind of no one's responsibility. That is not how we're operating either. And it also relates a little bit to what the gentleman said here about how we like to do things top down in Europe and set the parameters. And this is indeed also what we're doing with the regulations and the directives and the policies we're coming out with. It is to possibly you could say remind people as well of their responsibilities and make a framework so it becomes easier for people to become responsible. And here, of course, I'm talking mainly about critical infrastructure, so really the essential operators. This is what we're doing with the NIS framework and also with NIS 2, where, you know, indeed we're covering the medium-sized guys, we're not covering the small guys, but we have also put in these 2 provisions to make it then the responsibility of the member states. So we're telling the member states, well, even if the little guys are not covered here, you still have to come up with the point of contacts. You still have to give them guidance. You have to make them part of your responsibilities. It must be part of your strategy. You have to think about it, and not just think about it, but also do something. So this is also how we work with our policy frameworks. But I know, like, Iva, you talked already about NIS, so I don't want to go too much into this. I want to actually focus a little bit more also on the Cyber Resilience Act, because this is also a place where we are talking about whose responsibility is the cybersecurity of products, right? We're looking more and more. Phishing attacks are important for sure. I think it's around 10-15% of all successful incidents that are related to someone clicking when they're not supposed to. But the big problem is with the vulnerabilities in our products. 2/3 of our big cyber incidents are related to poor product security. It's as simple as that. And what we see is in the current situation, and it doesn't matter if you're a little or a big, it becomes the user who sits with the cost of a successful cyber attack. Even if he bought a product, he thought it was a good product, but it happened to be an insecure product because the guy developing it had not actually taken security into account. So the cost is on the SME, the cost is on whoever is the business operator or even the consumer who actually suffers from this attack. And this is what we're trying to fix with the Cyber Resilience Act. We are putting the responsibility for product security, whether it's hardware or software, on the people who are developing it, on the people who are selling it and making a benefit from it, as it should be. And as it is, by the way, in just about any other sector of the market. You cannot imagine someone selling an insecure car and someone has an accident and afterwards we say, no, it's the fault of the guy driving it. No, that's not how it works. So of course, this is like an important piece of legislation, because what we do is we say, if you're selling software and hardware, you have to take into account essential cybersecurity requirements. Now, this is good news for the many SMEs who use these products, of course, because that makes them less vulnerable to cyber attacks. It is not only good news for SMEs, we also have to be realistic about that. And that, of course, relates also to the point you raised, which is what do we do with all our SMEs who are developing these products? Because there will be compliance costs. It is, I mean, we cannot escape that, of course. We have talked when we developed the proposal. We talked also with SMEs, and we talked about how can we do it as smooth and simple for you guys. And one key message we got from them was like, please do not think about excluding us. And the reason for this is, of course, if they're excluded, then they become insecure in a way, right? They will not get the CE marking. They will not be someone you go to when you need to buy a product. So very important for SMEs is to be part of it and be able to go to it. So I think the key thing we need to look at here is, of course, to how to make it as simple as possible. And here I'm very, very happy and open to have further good ideas also coming from this room. Of course, we're looking at, how can we leverage Digital Europe program? How can we leverage our digital innovation hubs? This is work that we're already starting. Because we want to say, okay, these guys, they will need help. They will also need, possibly we look at how to make this conformity assessment as simple as possible. What are the testing tools we can develop? How can we actually just give them the right tools to do it in a simple way? So these are all areas that we're looking at. But I am very, very happy to engage much more also on discussions with you guys on how we can do it, because the ears are very open from our side, because obviously the last thing we want to do is to actually ruin the SME market, because as we also, and as MEP Stephanie, you said, this is really the backbone of our industry and also in cybersecurity. I mean, these are the guys who have to grow. I want to just make a small comment as well on what I call cyber culture, because we do regulation, we do policies and all of these, but we also hope that with this we can breed a stronger cyber culture. I think there's a huge issue still in the SMEs. Of course, we say we have data and so on that show that they know they have problems and so on. I saw a figure like the 61% of SMEs say they know they have problems with cybersecurity. I think that figure is heavily underestimated. Yeah. My guess is that it's around 90%, maybe even more, because I even know from the big guys, they also acknowledge they have problems. So I think it's an issue. And I think what we see is that, we have vulnerabilities in products. A patch is developed, so a way of fixing the problem is developed. But even so, the companies are not patching. They're actually not fixing the problem, and it makes them vulnerable. Just a few weeks ago, we had this huge scare with VMware, where there was an old vulnerability from 2021, which had not been patched. And the cyber agencies in Europe went out and said, super careful now, because the ransomware attackers are starting to use it. And everyone got like, oh my God, I need to patch. But this is something that should have been done 2 years ago, not when the bad guys are starting to use it. And we have tons of these examples. So we need to have much, much stronger focus on these kind of cybersecurity culture aspects in our SMEs. And this is, of course, goes together with the discussion on the skills, where indeed we'll come with the Cyber Skills Academy shortly. And I can also almost promise that there will be things for the SMEs in it, of course.
You heard that here, guys, first, okay?
Yeah. I said I can almost promise, so careful. No, but I think one of the things we also need to start looking at much more is to understand what profiles are we actually talking about, right? We're talking cyber skills, but what does it actually mean? Do we have proper data? Who's missing where, how, and so on? Do we understand what are the pathways? And I think we also discussed it here. We have a lot of people that are, let's say, we have, what did you call it? Underemployment? What was it you said? Negative unemployment, voila. We have negative unemployment in cybersecurity. We actually have real unemployment in many other areas. How do we create pathways from this type of skills that these people have into cybersecurity? We have to understand where are the people that need to go to cybersecurity and how do we create the right learning pathways for them. I don't think it's necessarily only the public's responsibility. I think public-private partnership here will be the key. I think industry has to play a role. Those who are going to employ the people will have to play a role. And actually, when we were doing the cyber defense communication, we had discussions with member states about how are they working on it, because there is a skills part in it. And I'm not going to promote necessarily Denmark because I'm Danish, but they do have a very interesting, actually double approach. On the one hand, because they have army conscription, they do cyber conscription. Yeah. So you can choose to whether you're going to go and become a normal soldier or do you want to be a cyber soldier. And of course, that's a big education machine, actually, that goes into private afterwards. But on the other side, they also created an academy with the National Cyber Center and with the businesses that are using it, where they take people with, straight out of high school, a very little background. They give them 3 months of training and then it's on the job. And there's a responsibility of the businesses that are taking them to keep on training them and so on. But there are so many different models and things we can do. And I think one of the key things also for us, because you're absolutely right, we have very little competence when it comes to education. But for us, it's also simply to make the other guys aware of what's happening in each member state. There are a lot of good ideas out there, but the knowledge is not being shared. And this, I think, is a big, big task for us ahead, is to say, hey, have you seen what the guy in the other country is doing? This is also one of the added values of the European Union. It's not always for us to do everything. It can also just be for us to tell the member states, hey, let's talk together. Thanks.
Christiane, thank you. I'm glad I waited for you to come at the end, because that was excellent, really, and really thought-provoking. But as a result of that, there's more challenge to you in the sense that. So, and I know that Eva, you want to come in. As the Commission, you have become one of the largest bankers of member states. Through the Resilience and Recovery Fund, people have created. The Resilience and Recovery Fund is probably one of the largest capital experiments we've seen in Europe, right? You have flushed, member states potentially with billions. And you've said that at least 20 to 30% of the money that every member state gets, it should be on, let's say, digitalization. So isn't it the role of you and Ivan, and I use this proxies, for the wider picture of Commission and Parliament, to make sure the issue of conditionality about people speaking to each other and making sure that actually digitalization takes place? Because what I'm concerned about what you say, when you think about it's not just the small players, the fact that patches aren't being done by bigger players when they should really do it anyway, is that who's the guarantor? Who's the guarantor of our cybersecurity as a result? Because you put legislation in place, who's going to cover our back as a result? In terms of, when you think about, you're putting in the under Resilience Act, you're basically transferring the kinds of measures we've had for food security, for example, with food safety, medicines, etc. It's almost like they're using the power of the union to make sure the standards of quality is there. But who's the regulator? Who's the person that actually judges and actually takes action, the enforcer of some of that?
I mean, for the specific case of the Cyber Resilience Act, this is with the member states, and I think we should not underestimate the very, very important role our member states play on cybersecurity.
Sure.
The same thing applies also to, who's going to go and tell the businesses to patch. Again, this is something that normally should be done by a national cyber agency or a regional. So a lot of these things is, of course, on the member states to do, and it's the same reason, by the way, why we have a NIS directive. It's because it is the role of the member states. Now, that does not mean that the Commission, that we're not keeping an eye on things and making sure that things are also working well and being done. But for us, I mean, it's obviously to ensure the right, let's say, balance of power, and to make sure that we also respect the different competences. We work very, very closely with the member states on these things.
My concern is this, that you leave it to member states to do the job, but this is a European issue. This is an issue for all Europeans. And if you've got, let's say, Greece decides that I haven't got the money because my bank is broke, Italy's, same, for example, but actually Germany says we can do something, or France, you're going to get this uneven playing field. We know that the attackers are not going to take advantage of that. So until something gross and terrible happens, suddenly someone will wake up and say, actually, we need a European solution to this. Let's have a European agency on. I mean, are you thinking about those kinds of issues? Let me hand over the mic to Eva, but I'll come back to you on that. Is that, should there be a public authority established in Europe that protects our cybersecurity? And that's the question I want to leave you. I'll come back to you with that. Eva, you want to come in?
Yes. Well, if you ask me, yes.
Right.
I'm thinking, I know accounting is not very fancy field, yeah? But SMEs, startups, we have to deal with this because it's mandatory to do business. So to me, cybersecurity in a way is also mandatory to do business. Not everyone can have a big financial firm and auditing and like good financial planning. Some people would have just a simple accountant on their speed dial like me, and this person would give me the answer when I need it. I would not have it in-house. But many people, like most of you who don't have a company actually, you still have to have tax declaration every year. This tax declaration, you don't go and fill in line by line. You really need to become an expert to fill it in. It's pre-automatically filled in for you by the government. You just agree with it and you move on. If you need more help, you go to the specialists. So there is some responsibility of governments as well to allow for this minimum level of security, which is also economy of scale, because it's one agency that is providing the tooling and the solutions, but it's also kind of a social contract. It's expected from governments to assure that their citizens have some basic security in place. This is on your question, but I also wanted to comment on two things that we spoke earlier. Skills. I think it's very important to keep this debate, awareness and skill, separate.
Okay.
Because awareness is for everyone, and it's different tools and it's different campaigns. When we speak about skills, it's more targeted, and it's not everyone should become cybersecurity expert. Unfortunately, we want, and there's no need for that. It's not possible. awareness for everyone, skills for limited, let's say, targeted areas. What are the gaps is known. There are studies, for instance, cloud security is one of them, but also more the governance compliance part. But what the problem is to filling these jobs is not that you don't have skills, is that the jobs are not, the job givers are not mature enough to recognize what skills they need. So they say 5 years with these two. That was invented 2 years ago, for instance. So obviously they won't find anyone with these skills. They don't recognize the potential in people because they come with the same set of skills, but from a different field. It was not cybersecurity, but it was quality management, it was management, it was client services, it was communication. So all these different aspects and fields are just not recognized by the job giver. So to me, it's, yes, training important, but also quality of job definition and maturity on this side is also necessary to fill the gap. And last but not least, compliance, very, very critical for Cyber Resilience Act. I know there are different pieces like the NIS already makes a big step, but we also have other legislation that are not necessarily cybersecurity legislation, but they introduce cybersecurity requirements, which are kind of bringing us step by step towards the CRA objective of everyone having some basic security, the DORA for financial services, medical device regulation for obviously medical devices. We have IoT requirements. So it's not like one big bang situation when CRA comes. It's many sectors would already be covered by then, and then we expand it to everyone. What is the tricky part? And here I speak as an expert company giving services, is really to make sure that you have the conformity assessment, you have the infrastructure in place, the support in place for these SMEs, so they, even if they have all the tools, all the security measures, they still have to prove it. They still have to certify, and this could be really a bottleneck if we are not ready. And this burden we cannot put on SMEs. It has to be coordinated maybe by the Commission, by ANISA, but there are different actors to come in place to do their job quickly, so that when the regulation comes into place, SMEs can certify.
Absolutely. But given what we've heard, it seems like you need either a city-wide or a region-wide solution of creating economies of scale. Because isn't that the wisest, sharpest thing to do? Because then you get a lot of people all in one scoop, rather than just waiting for the hairdresser, the butcher, the cafe, etc., or the supermarket in that scale, doing their own thing. It just seems to me, as a novice or a non-expert, that there are more creative solutions. But also, what we've heard today is that you've got the gradual accretion of different bits of regulation and legislation, and it feels like we're going to have a spaghetti soup of digitalisation legislation, rather than actually doing something on a larger scale, like the Digital Europe Act, Digitalisation Europe Act, which covers all eventualities potentially. And I know people want to come in, and I'm also, look at that, I'm over time. So if you bear with me for a couple of minutes, I'll go on a little bit. Gentleman here, please introduce yourself.
Thank you. Regarding who's responsible as
please introduce yourself.
I'm sorry, my name is Mike Sachs. I am with ACT, the app association. We are an association of small SMEs, app makers. With regard to who's responsible, I know awareness is really important, but it can be very hard if, for example, an app is pirated, to tell the difference between a legitimate app and a fake one. And a lot of times, basically, cyber criminals or bad actors use the trust that has been gained. They can take one of our apps, inject their code, and then they have the treasure trove of being able to be installed on somebody's device and steal data or mine Bitcoin or do whatever malicious act they want. From our point of view, from an app maker, it's very hard to deal with that. Right now, we can contact the App Store and try to have the app removed, and usually that works. With the DMA, all bets are going to be off on some level. If there's an app being hosted on a Russian website, we, as an SME, don't really have the capability to do anything about it. So I guess 2 points. One is IP protection and cybersecurity are very much connected. And the second thing is we can create all the regulations in the world, but without proper enforcement, which is, I think, the responsibility of the member states and the European Union, all those laws and regulations will be meaningless.
So would you like to see a cybersecurity agency, an enforcement agency in Europe? Would that make you feel better?
I think if such an agency can coordinate with all the member states, the different other divisions, to make enforcement more effective, I think that could be very useful.
Okay, let's put it out there again in Twitter and say, should Europe have a brand new cybersecurity agency that protects all of us in Europe? And you know, so thank you for raising that. I want to conclude. I want to come back to you, Christiane, if I may, on those big questions, and then I'm going to kind of come back to some of you on the panel before we just finalize and conclude this conversation. Back to you.
So should we have a brand new cyber agency? I would say no, because we already have a very good one, ENISA, and I think we should always choose to work with those who are there. Now, on the enforcement part, of course, that is also part of the treaty-given role of the Commission. So it's not something that we're necessarily very keen to outsource, and I think it's something that we as Commission need to take very seriously. It is something we take very seriously. You know, we do infringement cases against member states who are actually not fulfilling their requirements and so on. So this is also very much the role of the Commission, as it will be also on NISA, of course, and we will certainly also be keeping an eye on every other file in our portfolio. I wanted to say a few things, because you also talked about, you know, does it make sense to shift everything to the European level? And I would actually say, no, I don't think so. I mean, we're having the discussions here. How do we talk to the SMEs? I'm sorry, this is not going to happen from Brussels. No. You know, we need people with the boots on the ground to do this, and those are the ones who speak the language of the SMEs. Again, it's not, we're multilingual, but we cannot do that. The main tasks for these things are in the member states. What we have as an added value of the European level, and this is what we also see with NIS, for instance, is when there's a big crisis, this we introduced with NIS 2, we have a crisis coordination role via the Cyclone. We bring together all the agencies. We have discussion. Commission has a place in Cyclone. So we set up the crisis coordination mechanisms that are needed. We have the national CSERTs, where our 30U from the institutions are in as well, coordinated by ENISA. So we've set up all of these structures in actually to be able to coordinate and to overcome any fragmentations, whilst still respecting the essential role that member states play in it. I want to also flag that, you know, we announced it in the cyber defense communication, but we're also coming out with a couple of new initiatives shortly, which are also again about bringing more EU added value, using the EU budget to create EU added value on cybersecurity. So one of them is to support this setting up of security operations centers in Europe, to have a European infrastructure for SOCs. That is one of the things. We're already funding regional SOCs, so with member states coming together with their, let's say, friends in the regions normally. But we aim to have a European one. Why is this important? It's important because there is so much data coming through, and we are not making enough of it. We're not applying AI to actually detect the very, very small signals that something bad is about to happen. So this is what we try to build with that. We are also building this cyber solidarity mechanism. We announced it as a cyber reserve. I think the member states have called for it before using the term cyber emergency fund. So this is to have basically private providers who are able to step in whenever there's a crisis, cyber crisis, in a member state that is so big that the member state cannot handle it itself, but it's so big that the other member states cannot necessarily help them. We will have this reserve of trusted providers, trusted private providers that can step in and provide incident response help and so on. So these are also, again, added values that we come with from the European level without having to do the job of the member states, because they will remain the key player on cybersecurity.
It's really heartening to know. It sounds, I mean, that sounds real social contract stuff, because you're saying actually that's the responsibility of the state to actually make it happen. It's an unfortunate acronym that it's called SOC, though. But however, let's not worry about that. But no, and also don't forget what Christiane said, was that if any of you have ideas, bright ideas, especially about the hubs and the other elements that she's referred to, please get in touch, because I think it's great. You should be like that, and it's great that you're here offering an opportunity, because ideas come from everywhere. So people do please engage with her on this, and we'll bring her back definitely on that whole issue. Even if I may, should there be a public duty of cybersecurity in Europe?
I'm not sure about that. Public duty in terms of protection, as I mentioned, the first strategy, yes, but I'm much more favorable towards sharing experiences and first contact and awareness about SMEs and about people. If something is wrong, where they can call, what's the next step? I fully agree with Christiane's position in terms of future responsibilities. Who should be responsible for what, and we should be effective at this stage. So sharing experience, investment into education, and first point contact for not only for SMEs but also for citizens. If I may, just one experience which is connected with that, because I do understand the skills issue, and we have to invest much more into skills and education for experts as well. But the best experts, you know where they are? In the countries which were under attack. They invested into this. So, for example, in Baltic states and in Ukraine, which is now under this criminal Russian attack. So, next solution, hopefully we have peace, hopefully soon in Europe, would be also headhunt Ukrainian experts, which are really great in this case. And my personal experience, for example, European Parliament has been also under cyber attack quite heavily for many hours. And just at the day when we approved a resolution that Russia is the state supporting terrorism. So it was just the evidence that our resolution was the right one. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Karen, you're, if I may end with you, major global household brand. You're in everyone's, in this, everywhere.
If you have an Android, yes.
Touche. If you look ahead in terms of renewed social contract, where do you see Google's role in terms of, and I'm not talking about corporate social responsibility, this is about the kind of stuff that we've been talking about. So government has a responsibility to protect us and make sure we are safe, but also prevent stuff. What do you see as the role of Google in the future in that space?
Well, I think we have three roles. I mean, the first one is we have to protect the people. So making sure that everything we actually provide, like making sure the apps are safe, making sure that you're not going to be receiving basically all these attacks. So that's actually the first role for the consumers. I think we also have, of course, a role basically to work with governments, to ensure like digital transformation, ensuring partnerships, sharing the threats. I mean, the report came out with that only 50% of the companies use cloud and back up their data and actually update their software. So if they were like, going into different cloud system, they could actually get that automatically, which actually helped them already. But of course, we need to work with governments so that the cloud systems are open and operable, because that's very important as well, that you can have a very, systems that work together. And also the last bit we need to do as well is like we have a role as well to develop new technologies. Christiane was referring to AI. AI is a great tool to actually detect, basically new threats, but can also be used by bad actors basically to actually come up with new threats. So how we come up always on the forefront on that. Also using encryption, which is very important as well, which I find is actually better than data localization. Really, last level of encryption, is very important. So I mean, using quantum as well for like the next level. So all these kind of things are very important, and I think we have a role on that into like thinking about the next technology.
Great. Thank you very much. I've gone nearly 10 minutes over time, people, so I'm really sorry for those of you who had to rush over. But I hope you think that was fun. At least I enjoyed it anyway. I hope you enjoyed it. I think we got a lot from our contributors, and also thank you for participating in this conference, because as we say at Friends of Europe, it's not a classic just panel and then you in the audience. It's about us jointly solution making. So thank you for standing up for that and engaging with us. Michelle, Christiane, Iva, Ivan, and Karen, thank you very much for being excellent contributors, and thank you all for being here. And there's more coffee and tea, and keep in touch. We've got lots of events on this topic, but the one thing I think we're going to have to be thinking about is that cybersecurity is only going to increase in terms of its potential, its potential to attack us, And I think that we do need to create a different, as you were saying, I think earlier, all of you, a sense of a different cultural norm around cybersecurity, both amongst children and wider communities. And also that final point, as we look into, International Women's Day, how do we make sure we put a real push on young girls choosing STEM and getting into technology rather than not? Thank you all very much. Take care. Thank you. That's it. Thank you.